Hi friends, welcome to the Very Occasional Podcast with Morgan Quaid, now with added citrus so you can really get your lemon on. This episode features the exceedingly melodic Nicky V, a Nashville-based session musician, composer, instrumentalist, music teacher, and all-around awesome dude. You can find Nicky's latest work at NickyV_music on Instagram, or just look up into the sky on any night and wish upon a star. Before we get into the show, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast, because if I can get the channel to 500 subscribers, my brother is going to bake me an angry gingerbread man. Welcome to the Very Occasional Podcast with Morgan Quaid. I'm joined by the marvelous Nicky V, who is joining me all the way from the US of A. First of all, thank you, Nicky, for joining us.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to have you. Now, Nicky and I have known each other for a little while now. We've worked together on a bunch of projects, musical projects. So the sum of what I know about you, Nicky, is that you're a session guitarist. You live in Nashville. Which I believe is Do you still live in Nashville? Is that Have I got that right? Yes, Nashville. There you go. Which is in the Tennessee.
Yep.
Correct. Excellent. See how much I know about.
You got it down.
So why don't we start? Because that's all I really know about you. So I'm keen to sort of dig in and learn a little bit more, and learn a little bit more about, the whole session musician thing and what got you into it. So why don't we start with how did you first fall in love with music, or what was your first exposure to music?
So I remember just being more into it than like the average kid, I think. So like I would just like obsess over like music videos. I'd watch CMT or like, any kind of music video and just sit around and wait for like my favorite song to come on like all day,
Right.
And, my mom played and sang when she was younger, but she got her tonsils taken out when she was in her 20s and she stopped singing. And so I had no idea that my mom was a performer, no idea. I just knew there was this old 65 Gibson in the corner of the room I wasn't supposed to touch. And so, of course, I got to be like, I think I was 12 or 13. I was like, I met some girl and she mentioned she liked some guy that played guitar. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure out this guitar thing. That was like classic story, right? And it's like so original. But I went and I got mom's old Gibson out, and, it hadn't been tuned in 15 years or something. And so I started messing around playing slide with a butter knife. So I grew up like Robert Johnson and like records and old Angola prison recordings and weird stuff my parents played on vinyl. And I did not have to slide stuff around, and finally mom like came in and was like, no, let me show you to do this, and she tuned it up for me and taught me G, D, and C and a couple chords and picking patterns and things like that. And then after that I just started learning in bars and clubs in Southeast Missouri, which is where I'm from originally. And there's just like this like plethora of amazing musicians there, and they're just like, different parts of the world. Like if you're in Los Angeles and places like that, they might be more eclectic and play a bunch of different styles, but like at that like Americana roots rock kind of thing they do there, they're just masters of that thing, I just learned from those guys, and they were nicer to me than I deserved and showed me a bunch of things and kind of equipped me before I went off to like study for real in music school. But that's kind of
Did you just kind of like saunter, you're sitting in the back, creeping in the back of the bar, and then you just sort of saunter up to them and say, hey man, that's a really cool riff you did there. How did you broach that subject?
Okay. So I knew most of the guys already because my dad was a salesman for Miller Lite. And so like where I was always as a kid, I was in the bars, and I played a lot of like pool. So I was like in adult tournament. I was like 9 playing, so I played pool with all these guys. They already knew me pretty well. So when I started learning guitar, they were like, okay, man, here, try this. Here's a pentatonic scale. And they're like, come back next week, I'll show you something else. And then they get me on stage with them, like, okay, solo. And I'll just play like the pentatonic scale over and over again, just straight up and down the scale. They're like, no, you gotta break. And they like try singing a line within that scale, I'd try to sing something and play it. And that's just kind of how I approached it. I kind of knew him, had the relationship established through pool originally. But
That is so cool. That's like the best way to learn how to play guitar, I reckon, because they're doing it the formal way where you sit down and you have lessons and it's so boring and dull. That is such a better way to do it. Kids, you know, go to bars and you know, get involved in the music scene. Not really, but yeah, that's great.
It was funny, man, because it definitely gave me a leg up. I'd say not say a leg up, but it gave me a slight edge when I went to music school, because I had, you know, like a lot of people are gifted with like have different types of giftings. You know, some people are born with a great ear or really fast hands and things like that. I always just had like the only gifting I really had. Everything was like pretty middle of the road. I have enough students now that I can like gauge who does what naturally well, and I can like assess myself what I had. And I really didn't. I was very middle of the road in everything, but I always had like a pretty good feel, and I could always have like a decent tone in my hands. And then just playing so much, I was playing 5 nights a week whenever I was, from the time I was 15 to 18. And so I already had, you know, I mean, thousands of hours worth of stage experience by the time I was 18 years old and got to school for it. And so I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to read music or anything like that, you know, and I kind of knew my own homegrown mental theory I developed through playing with whatever I could, you know. In Los Angeles, like, oh, here's a name for what you're doing, and here's a much more in-depth look at what you're doing, you know.
Right. Yeah.
For a lot of the guys, you know, kind of were bedroom shredders for, you know, the first 10 years of their lives, you know. And on stage, it was like a very clear, noticeable difference in who had stage experience and who didn't, because that was part of the school. You know, it's like, you know, you got to be able to play live if you want to make money.
Yeah. And how did you find, because you had that experience, and you sort of knew roughly, you had your own version of, okay, this is what I have a similar sort of thing with, you know, I don't know what scale it is, but I know it makes me feel like this, or I just do this, or, you know, have these riffs just plugged into your head and everything. So when you then sat down and started to learn, okay, this is technically what it is, how it works, or did that demystify things? Did it make it less enjoyable, more enjoyable?
It opened
it change up. Right. Okay.
It made it more, the whole, like, you know, don't learn the theory of your creativity. There's not a lot of things in music that I'll be like, that's not true, because like everything's different for everybody. You know what I mean? It's like the most subjective art form you can imagine. But that's like the one thing where I'm like, no, you're wrong. Like, the more you learn, it'll just open up your creativity. It gives you so many more options, and teach you how to take one aspect of your playing or one mental harmonic concept and apply it to other situations if you know how to manipulate it around and bend a few chord tones here and there.
Right.
And like, I'm very team learn what you're doing.
There you go. Yeah, there's a similar thing. I think I've heard actors and directors sort of say the similar sort of thing about film. You know, that the enjoyment they will get about, you know, with watching a new TV show or series or whatever is different to what they would have had before they knew all of that sort of stuff, because they'll be analyzing a bit more, but it's no less enjoyable and no less creative, and that's really, really cool. So you pick that up, you're starting to do a lot of gigs, you're starting to earn some money through this thing. Was there a point where you realized, was it always pretty much, this is what I want to do, I don't want any other job? No. Okay. Tell us about that.
I was a nerd. So I graduated towards the top of my class out of like 400 or 500 students in my high school, made straight A's and all that, good test scores. And so I was going to be an engineer. And because like, if you're a smart kid in Southeast Missouri, you get 3 options. You get doctor, lawyer, engineer. And I didn't want to go to school for 10 years to be a doctor.
No.
Wasn't big with language arts. I want to read all day to be a lawyer. And I was pretty good. I was like, okay, let's kind of lean towards the engineer thing. And me and my dad are at Steak and Shake, and Steak and Shake's like an American burger joint chain. Yeah. And we're sitting there, and he's like, do you want to be a guitar player? Or he said, do you want to be an engineer? And I'm like, yeah, sure. He's like, wrong answer, Junior. He goes, sure should not be the answer for what you want to do the rest of your life. But I didn't know he's like, you can do whatever you want, man. He goes, I got stuck here with a failing dump truck business and a farm. I didn't want just a nightmare, you know? He wanted to go to California and build hot rods. He's a mechanic. And I wanted to go out there to California and build cars. He goes, you're a guitar player, man. And I came home the next day, and there was the Musicians Institute, Berkeley, a school in London on the table. He's like, pick one. And so it's like the opposite story of like everybody else is like, you know, get a real job. Dad's like, you know, forget the real job. Go play guitar. This is what you do. And he still knows me better than I know myself. You know, he's like, he clearly saw that I had what it took to, like, you know, make a living at it. So thanks Dad on that one.
That's amazing. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of the reverse of what you want to be the traditional story. You know, you want to come from a family where they put you down and you never don't you ever play that guitar again, otherwise I'll lock you in the cupboard again or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, it's like the opposite. That is really refreshing and really great to hear.
Man,
Yeah.
it's cool. It's funny. It's like I had to do an interview for I played the Grand Ole Opry 3 weeks ago, and I did an interview and a news thing for my hometown and all this stuff. And everybody wants like a struggle story.
Yeah.
Tell us how you know we're know had this horrible circumstance and came into it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't have it. Like I've been like so lucky. And everybody's been so good to me and like just blessed far beyond what I deserve from day one of playing guitar. And nothing but good things happen since I moved to Nashville. There's been no struggle whatsoever. I mean, I work hard, you know. I put in the hours, you know, and I did the best I could to not mess up along the way, you know. But like I've been dealt a very good hand with a great family, and you know, just everything's been great. I know that's like the lamest story to tell people. Who are like, yeah, you know, but that's the truth.
So, and sometimes that's the way it goes. It's good as a parent. I like hearing those sorts of stories as well, because you hear all of the other stories, and when you've got a kid, you're thinking, well, I want to be like that dad. I want to be the one that looks at my kid and thinks, okay, what's going to make him happy, and how can I encourage him, and all that sort of stuff, instead of the usual, you know, thou shalt not, and then they end up rebelling and all that sort of stuff. That's really cool.
My mom just, I mean, as well. I mean, she was just incredibly support. Dad's the one that kind of pulled the trigger originally to like spark it in my mind, you know?
Yeah.
And then her being cool enough to be like, yeah, I'm going to send my 18-year-old son from the Midwest to Hollywood, California.
Yeah.
Drop him off in the middle of Crazyville, you know, to learn guitar. So that was like, you know, here's to mom on that one for sure.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference, hey? It's we don't hear a lot of stories about the positive supporting family, you know. It's they don't make for great Hollywood stories, so we don't tend to hear about them. So what was the sort of transition? And I'm guessing it's not a moment, I'm guessing there's a period of time, but what's the transition from, okay, I've studied now, I'm starting to work, I'm doing that sort of thing, to, all right, this is what I do now. This is a legitimate thing that I do for my living.
Okay. So I went to the Musicians Institute in Hollywood, right? It's a 2-year program, and I just learned a ton there. I didn't drink until I was having beer until I was 23, never smoked pot, nothing.
Just studying.
It was just like hardcore studying, and everybody else was partying, or not everybody, most of them were partying and doing the Hollywood thing. And I'm like, and there was a bunch of crazy circumstances getting out there. I was in this like full ride competition and made it through like 2,000 contestants in the top 25. They flew me out to compete, and then I was one slot away from winning anything. So I into it, you know. That I was like, you know, this gigantic financial burden put on me and on my family to go play guitar all of a sudden. So I was like, I am not like take this for granted at all. You know, I'm like, I'm gonna study as hard as I can and prove everybody wrong. So I had this like giant chip on my shoulder. The best thing that ever happened was losing that competition by far. Because if I would have won, I'd be like, hey, I'm the cool kid from the Midwest, and my hometown loves me. I'm great. Down here in Hollywood, I just got a free ride, you know. No, I'm like, here's $50,000 and you're 18, dude, you know. And so I practiced just like a maniac. I was up at 5:30, 6 o'clock every day practicing 4 hours before my first class. And I was literally the last one to leave, you know, the last open counseling, which were teachers would just open up their door to talk or answer questions and things like that. I lived at the school pretty much. Just worked as hard as I could. And my last like month there, Carnival Cruise Lines came through holding auditions. And I didn't even think about like playing music on a boat. I didn't think that was like a thing, you know? It's just a job you don't think about when you're in the middle of the United States, you know? So I was like, that sounds interesting. I'm like, that'd be a good way to like pay off some student loans and, you know, work on, I feel like I'd have a lot of time to practice all the stuff I've had crammed in my head for the last 2 years in school without having to worry about health insurance or any adulting thing. For the most part, you know, it's just money in the bank and you're out there and you can hone your craft. So I did that, and I got the gig. A couple of us, they took a couple of us on, and they said, yeah, we'll be in touch. And I was like, awesome. And they never got in touch. So I went back to Missouri to kind of regroup and move to Nashville and try to figure out how I was going to tackle the beast of Nashville. and I'm eating wings with my dad at a bar when I used to learn guitar. And I get a call from this guy, and he goes, "Hey man," he goes, "Can you be in the Bahamas like in like next week?" I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "What do I got to do?" He goes, "You got to get this like crazy physical done and all this drug test and all this crazy stuff. It's a corporate gig, you know." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, just send me a list, email it to me, you know." And he's like, "Cool," and we'll send a set list over. And so they sent the set list over that day, and it was like 325 songs. And I'm like,
whoa,
a week for this, you know?
Yeah.
And so I like started just woodshedding them as hard as I could. Didn't sleep for like 3 days. And then like day 3 or 4, I got the charts, and the charts are all in a different key.
Oh no!
And I'm like, dude, I'm like a monster reader, you know? And so I'm like, oh my God. So I had to learn all this stuff, you know, again, and cram this in my head as much as I can, fly down there and go to rehearsal with this band. The band was just amazing. Like,
right.
Hi, I'm Nicky, and you're listening to the Very Occasional Podcast. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. We can make some music together. Take care. People always talk about like, you know, like kind of bash the cruise ship gig. And the guys in the band were all just like 2 of them I just did sessions with. They're studio guys in Nashville, you know, and like total monster players. Just by pure fluke circumstance, I got in this band, and
wow,
the band was really good. So they used this as like a rating booster. So if the ship was doing poor, they would send this band there to try to boost the ratings and things like that.
Okay.
Because at the end of a cruise, the people give like a score to the entertainment or this and that, you know, and it's been a really entertaining band. And so I played with those guys for 3 contracts, which was like you're out at sea for 6 months. And I did all that. And it was super cool. And then I became a music director. So I became the boss and had my own band. And I kind of picked who I wanted and put this together of just amazingly talented individuals. And I was just crazy lucky to have great people from day one. And I paid off a big chunk of my student loans and saved up a bunch of money. And so I could move to Nashville and not have to struggle, you know. And kind of reached the ceiling there with what I could do within the company without having an office job. And I was like, okay, it's time to move on. So I went to on to Nashville.
And what I've always found, you know how you hear the stories all the time, you know, about the big bands and they're breaking up and there's drama and fighting and there's all this sort of stuff. I've always found professional session musicians, you just don't see a lot of that. They're pros. They get in, they do the job, they know what they're doing, no drama. Is that been your experience, or is there still a bit of, you know, creative?
There is on the studio side of things. There is definitely, like, I remember my grandmas and old aunts being worried about like, oh, it's gonna get into music and there's gonna be drugs and alcohol. I got to like the Nashville studio scene, and like, if you wanted to not work in Franklin, Tennessee, which is like where a lot of the studios are, bring a beer to the studio. You'll never get called back again.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
These guys are like accountants. You know, they're all family guys, and this is their 9 to 5. They book, you know, sessions that start at 10 a.m. and end around 6 p.m. and do however many they can within that day where they get called for. And some it's through the union, some it's not through the union. It's highly refined skill set of recording whatever instrument they play, or drumming or bass, whatever, or producing, and they're all brilliant. Just IQs are off the charts. I feel like the dumbest person that remembers how I'm with them, and they're all hilarious. And I've noticed that like the comedy thing is what people don't talk about. If you want to see like some funny guys, get on a session. And there's like, say there's like 6 guys or 5 guys. 2 of them will be like the funniest individuals you've ever heard in your life. Like you do a Netflix stand-up skit, you know, and they're there to entertain everybody. So like, you know, room, you know, literally an isolation booth, you know, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. They have a talk back, and they're just hilarious, and they keep each other entertained. And there's like all these like very specific Nashville jokes they always all make, you know, and it's pretty cool. It's fun, and like that's absolutely what I've always wanted to do, is play on records, and so it's great getting to do that for a living now.
Yeah, so it is interesting. It's a very different story than what we're told about bands in general, and the drama involved, and the, you know, throwing TVs out the hotel bedrooms and all that sort of, you know, that sort of stuff. Particularly, and as you say, there's that component that we probably don't think of, which is you got to work with these people. So why the hell would you work with someone that's, you know, smoking, drinking, turning up late, not doing the job? You know, it's like any job. You want someone that's going to do it and do it right. And
Exactly. And
you know,
on the live side of things, there is more of that, obviously. You know, even at like really high, you know, like household name levels, on some like major label touring gigs, there's definitely drama on those. In the studio, I've never in 4 years in Nashville heard any drama in any studio whatsoever. Nothing.
Yeah.
Not one. But on the touring side, you know, there's stuff you'll be playing with some artists that they've known each other for a long time. They might not get along, or certain aspects of the personalities don't initially mesh, but they made a lot of money when they were younger together, you know, or you're playing with a new artist that has a giant ego, you know, you have no idea.
Yeah.
But, and then you just kind of try to stay away and show up, play the record, and leave and do your job. But
so what's the kind of split, I suppose, of your work in terms of recording on albums, doing live stuff, teaching students?
Yeah.
You know, do you have a rough idea of kind of what that split looks like for you at the moment?
So I try to be as like transparent with like income, everything as I can for people that want to learn this. Because I remember when I was 18, and Dad's like, you can play guitar. Of course, my nerdy self was like trying to figure out how much does a musician make, a studio guy? How much does it? There's no way to Google like what Garth Brooks' guitar player makes or what Brent Mason makes a year, you know, playing on records.
Yeah.
There's no way to know this stuff unless you just ask people. So I've always tried to be as absolutely transparent as I possibly could with everybody about like, here's, you know, kind of the percentage breakdown of where my income comes from. So the largest chunk of it comes from online recording and recording it, especially after 2020 hit where everybody got locked up.
Yeah.
And so I record 60 to 75 songs a month at the house, which is a lot, you know, and different projects and different loop libraries, all kinds of stuff, film projects. And then I would say probably 70% of my income comes from that, 20% live, and then 10% is teaching and odd music jobs. You know, like just people paying you to set up their guitar, things like that, or, you know, just consulting things I don't even think to charge people for if they ask, you know. And I'm like, if they call me and they have questions, and I'm just like, no, I'll just tell you. And they're like, let me pay you. I'm like, man, I just wish someone would have told me this, you have to pay me. And then you'll wake up the next day and there'll be something in your Venmo, you know.
Yeah.
But,
right.
Yep. And a lot of that comes from just online websites, or I get a ton through Instagram now, honestly. Like a lot of work comes through Instagram.
Really? Yeah. That's weird that's become the, I mean, it makes sense, but it's also, who'd have thunk it 10 years ago that would be a primary source of traffic?
It's crazy. I would say that 25% of my online income comes through Instagram. Just people DMing.
Wow.
And there's a certain, like, if people are trying to wonder how to get into this and maybe make money at that, here's the hustle. What you do is anytime you're doing like say you're doing a project for an artist, right, or the producer that's hired you, I'll just do like a little 20-second video of their guitar solo. And I'm like, hey man, this is just for the artist's social media if they want to throw something up. And they always tag you in it. And every producer is friends with 15 other producers. And they'll throw it up there, hey, this is Nicky. And then all of a sudden, bam, you're now in their network. And they want the thing, and they knew that you went the extra mile to put an iPhone right beside your amp and do a little thing right there. It's not edited or anything. It's just a quick little video. If they want to do something with it, they can. A lot of the projects you're doing are, you know, kind of lower budget things, because that's the nature of how it works. You do, you know, small budget stuff is your main nest egg, which is good. You don't have all your eggs in one basket. But I work with, you know, 50 different producers and artists all the time. So if one takes a break, the other one usually picks up the slack somewhere else, and it kind of balances itself out. But that's the Instagram hustle. And then they end up coming and meeting you, and when they come to town and things like that, then you develop actual friendships and relationships with them. And then you're their go-to guy as long as you don't mess up. So two tracks out of tune.
Yeah. And I suppose there is that how you respond to people when they query. There's all that professionalism that, you know, makes a huge difference. There's something I've learnt in the some areas of the comic industry and other areas of writing. I think two of the areas that I think artists sometimes miss is customer service and self-promotion. You've got to have your face out there. You've got to be, but also just the basics of just do it right by the customers, man. They will talk to other people, and it'll either be good or bad. So you got to kind of, do the right thing.
What I've realized is it's not just doing right by the customer. It's going so many extra miles past their expectations that they become evangelists of your brand.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's like, once you really take care of them, and they didn't know what they were doing when they first started out, but now they know what they're doing. And then remember that time 4 years ago, whenever you redid your entire project because they got the key a half step off.
Yeah.
And that wasn't on me. That wasn't my mistake. That was their mistake. And they didn't realize it then, but looking back 4 years in the future, they're like, oh man, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe I asked them to do that. Then they're embarrassed about it. Go to Nicky, man. He's the guy.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. So in terms of creativity, one of the things that I've actually, this is how we met. So one of the reasons that I reached out to you was because I run a loop label with, for producers and that sort of stuff. And I completely exhausted all creativity that I had at my disposal. I used every instrument that I had. I bought some new instruments, and then all of that went. And I thought, I've got nothing left to give. I need to go to session musicians like yourself and get some of what you have and use that. So how do you deal with, I suppose, do you ever get to the end of the creativity, or do you get to the point where you think, here is another pop song that is like, it's the same 3 keys I've used a gazillion times before? How do you deal with that kind of motivation?
So I'll say this: you find it in different, that's a tough question. There's a couple different answers to it. So in my world, it's like the 4 to 8 bar, usually 4 bar pop country guitar intro, right? It's like 6-4-1-5 and G or A, and right around 100 beats a minute. And you got to do something to make that uniquely itself now. And it's my job as the session guitar player to give that song its identity now, not the producer. Nobody's going to sing me a guitar lick. I got to come up with it. And they're either going to love it or they're going to hate it. If it's remote, you're going to have to email back and forth until you get it right. And sometimes I'll send them options, and I'll be like, here's a couple options for it. But digging up like that, okay, I got to do something different now because I don't want to play the same lick I played on artist A's record versus artist B's record. And I also don't want to play something that's not as good for artist B. Even though I liked A better, I got to come with something equally as good or better every single time. That's what gets hard.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's tricky. And you find that, and this is like the cheesiest answer ever, but like, I think as like life changes and new chapters open up in your life, you start to think differently and play differently. And like where I was at, during 2020, I went back to my folks' house because like Nashville shut down. My mom can cook. I can't cook. Let's go home and hang out. I hadn't seen them in 10 years really. So I went back to Missouri for 4 months and set up in their basement. And they have an old house made in the late 1800s, Victorian house, and the basement is a dungeon, like a legitimate dungeon. But it sounds like $1 million. It sounds like
amazing.
And I'm like, cool. So I got all these nice mics and the Santa Cruz down there and everything. And I'm sitting there in this dark dungeon for 4 months and no inspiration around me. None. Like no beautiful visual mountain landscape out of a window. You see these beautiful studios and all this. And it's like you have to dig like straight out of your own your own heart and your own head to try to do something beautiful and creative for these people because they deserve it. They're spending their hard money on a project and trust you with it. So I'm trying to give them everything I got. And it's hard. What's funny though is in that environment of like being down in that basement, with just nothing for inspiration, you get creative somehow. Like this thing happens in your brain where you're just like, I'm just gonna think totally out of left field. I could almost like flip a switch on. Like I'm gonna pull something right out of the side of my head and see what I can do with it. And sometimes it wouldn't happen. And I'd be like, okay, let's you want inspiration? You're doing something that's like a sad, intimate thing. Look through some old family photo albums. And like really like, okay, here's my Aunt Sharon, my Grandma Judy. I miss things like that. And it'll put you in a different mindset whenever you go to start writing a part for somebody's record that you're working on.
Wow.
And I would, that's, it's getting desperate at that point, but doing that kind of stuff, I did it. And then a lot of times, that sounds goofy, but like if you're looking for something, just listening to a lot of stuff too helps. It's kind of the whole yard thing. So if you listen to a lot of good music, a lot of sometimes different phrasing will come out of you and things like that. And like the classic answer, pulling from different instruments, transcribing saxophone players, things like that. That's like the standard music school response to how to get creativity. But
yeah, man, I tell you, it's a very, what you're describing is exactly what I go through with writing when you're on book 3 or book 4, and you have to, it's got to be exciting. It's got to have twists and turns. It's got to be new. It's that same thing of where do you dig to get that fresh stuff that you haven't, sort of plumbed before. All right, here we go. Let's get deep into the drama. So is there a failure that you're willing to share that you really learnt from, or it's helped you, or it was just something that you had to go through in your journey? It can be music, it can be anything, but yeah, something like that.
Absolutely. The biggest one was probably that full ride scholarship that I didn't win. And just like chip on the shoulder and all that. But like the one in the session world that like will forever stick out in my mind is I got called to play on a record with this. There's a producer in town. Her name's Femke Reynolds, and she's incredible. She like worked with like Babyface and everybody. She's like the most talented individuals I've ever met in my life, right? And she called me to play on the session with my friend Martin, who was on the cruise ship with me. He's this crazy gifted bass player, and we're at a studio in East Nashville, or on the east side of town. A drummer named Wes Little. It's his studio. It's like this beautiful home studio, and he's played with Beyonce and Robin Ford and everybody else. One of those kind of guys.
Yeah.
And it was like my first Nashville tracking session I was on. Because I've probably recorded 400 or 500 songs in my house at this point when I first got to town. And I was just, never done a tracking session or anything. And I get in there, and I could not lock in at all with the click. No. And I was just, and I know I can play on the grid. I can play on the grid. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I'm like, nothing. And like my buddy Martin is like totally having my back, and he's like splitting the difference between me and the drummer to make me sound like I'm on, because he's like the most wonderful human being in the world. He's making himself sound bad to try to make me sound good. That's a good mate right there.
Oh, that's a good mate. Yeah.
And the drummer Wes, he's just incredible. He's out one take every song. Just like literally.
Don't you hate it?
My cues are gone if I don't get it on the first take with him. You know what I mean? So I have to try to get where he filled, that kind of stuff. And it was like 2 days of absolute embarrassing hell. And the acoustic stuff went a lot better. I did the acoustic stuff the next morning, just me and the producer. And she was great. And they're all super nice. And like, oh man, you're good. The guitar's in the hot seat, like just trying to make me feel good, because they could tell I was like very uncomfortable with how shifting my pocket was. Like, here's the grid, and I'm a quarter inch ahead. Wherever. And I couldn't figure out what's going on. And I called my producer friend Steve, and I'm like, dude, like I just had the worst 2 days of my life. He goes, "What?" He goes, "We used to using the Logic click." He goes, "Everybody in Nashville used the MPC click." I'm like, that's what it was. It was the sound of the click once just threw me off. I've only recorded with that one metronome.
With the one, yeah.
He sent me the MPC click, and I just use that in Logic now instead. But I couldn't get in tune, and because I didn't realize that like one of my pedals had like a modulating reverb on it or something, just like total new to figuring things out, and she was like, your guitar's in tune, but something's not working right. I'm getting some weird after it builds up kind of thing on this like real ambient stuff. And I'm like tearing my brain apart, it's like revamp my board, learn how to use some of my equipment, learn how to be more in tune, and then got used to that new click. And that was like the most embarrassing 2 days of my life. And he was nice enough to like my buddy to like go through and help me work it all out, because he's a good friend of mine, and I'm going to his studio tomorrow. We're doing sessions there tomorrow for some homework thing. And that was just part of like the growing pains of becoming a studio musician, and that, like once like Femke and Martin and Wes were just like beyond gracious with me. But it was pretty rough, man. It was a tough one.
That is tough, and it's such a small, simple thing that can throw you completely at that starting stage. That's amazing.
And another thing too, like guitar, even if you nail it, guitar's always the last one out of the room. Drums,
Right.
band, maybe they'll come in and play some tambourine on it or do some extra cymbal stuff or something. Bass, if they're a studio bassist in Nashville, they're amazing, period. They're going to get it on the first take, and then they're going to make 1 or 2 punches and be done, if that. And play the perfect part every time, first try, out of nowhere, and not even paying attention. It's like, do it left and right. Okay, now stack that, double that. It's like I played one thing. It's like, this real intricate, weird Mayer-esque kind of clean Hendrix kind of guitar part. Okay, you double that on the left side now? I'm like, better relearn what I just did real quick. Okay, now come with the signature lick. It's going to define this song for the next 10 years of its life. It's tricky. It's pressure, but that's, why you get called is you can either handle it or you can't.
Yeah. Wow, that is.
It's just the tricky part there of them being like, finding people that are nice enough to tolerate you through the tough learning curve of it.
Yeah. Okay, so a little bit of a side question. I have an issue with my G string.
Yeah, lay it on me.
Always with my G string, and it just acoustic, electric, whatever else it is. I'll always tune it a little high. I'm always tuning it a little bit too high because it always feels flat. No matter what I do, it always feels flat. I'm guessing you don't have that issue by the look that you're giving me, because, or do you?
Is it staying in tune?
Yeah, it'll stay as it is. Yep. But and I don't know whether it's my ear as well, whether I like it just a little bit sharper than what it should be.
I can tell. I have a guess. So I had it was a $7,000 Martin custom shop in a room that sounded like God. You hit a G chord on that thing, it just blooms and everything opens up, right? Heaven's angels sang. And my friend Steve, I went to his studio and we were doing a record on one of my good friends, Chelsea Carter, and we're doing this song. It's like a very intimate acoustic and vocal kind of thing. And I was like, I played this thing and I just got lucky and nailed it on the first take. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, hey man, that was great. Let's do it in tune now. And I'm like, oh God.
Oh man.
And it was like this super hard thing, I'm like, oh God. So I got it and I'm like, I'm in tune. I'm like, I know I'm in tune. I'm like, got my tuner out. I'm like checking every note in the chord as I like hold the chord, and still play it, I'm like, it's still. And he's like, man, because he's got a pair of vintage U64s on it, and he goes, you're not in tune, man. And we sat there for like 2 hours trying to get this Martin in tune, right? Like just driving ourselves crazy. He's got a fantastic ear. He's just a monster musician. And he was producing it. And he was like, I think it's the G string, but it sounds in tune, but then when we get playing, it's not. There's no verb, no verbs modulating this time or anything on it, And we couldn't figure it out. And he gets on the phone and he calls. He's like, I'm sitting there. I got so desperate, I pulled up like my favorite acoustic guitar record, which is it's like a gospel record by Alan Jackson called Precious Memories.
Right.
And I'm like, man, I'm driving myself crazy. I called Steve the next day. I'm like, I've been listening to this Precious Memories thing. And he goes, oh, I know who did that. That's Bruce Watkins, who's like one of like the OG acoustic Nashville guitarists. And he goes, let me call him. It's me and Steve are in there. He goes, I'm here with this dumbass kid. He can't figure out how to tune a guitar. And he goes, it's close, but it's not quite there. He goes, and Bruce is like, what's he playing? He goes, it's a Martin. He goes, tell him to tune his B string 2 cents flat to 3 cents flat, and his A string 2 cents flat. Is he playing a G chord? He goes, yeah. He goes, okay. Now he goes, if you capo up, it's going to change more. You got to drop your E string about 5 cents as you go up higher. He goes, I'll make you sound more in tune. I'm like, so if we adjust everything around the G string, but the G string, it made the G string more in tune. Well, the problem with this was actually within the guitar, and I didn't realize this until I got a really, really good guitar. So this is a long-winded response. But
that's all right. I'm fascinated, dude.
This drove crazy forever, okay?
Yeah,
and I'm like, this is a good guitar. This should not be having this problem. And if you let me grab one, I'll show you.
The village burns, set to the torch by wicked men in strange masks. He has no time for grief or sorrow. The blood of his kin calls out and must be answered.
So this is a very cheap guitar. This is a $150 guitar. I got it for like bluesy stuff. So if I play,
so good. Sorry, I'm excited.
G chord on this, right? If you play a G chord on an acoustic guitar and you mute it really quick, an overtone comes out that's right here. It's like if you divide this one into 4, it's this. Well, people will debate me and tell me I'm wrong on this, but this is my experience on it. Some guitars naturally are tuned acoustically to themselves perfectly, and some guitars are not. That Martin was not. And so when I got that guitar perfectly in tune, that overtone on that G string was 3 cents sharp every time. And there was no splitting the difference. It would always sound out, no matter what I did. And so the Bruce trick of tuning the B string, A string, and E string a little different definitely helps. And James Taylor's got videos on this stuff too, but I didn't realize until I played the Santa Cruz, which is upstairs in the case. But one of my students is just a great human being and gifted me a Santa Cruz, which is
great.
You know, I mean, I cried when he gave it to me. I couldn't believe it. And, you know, it's a $13,000 guitar, which is absurd. You know, nobody's $13,000 on a guitar. But I realized the difference between a $7,000 guitar and a $13,000 guitar is when you have a pair of vintage Neumann U64s on it, and that overtone is dead on.
Yeah.
And they sand those braces and they tune that thing to itself. So when you play that G chord, every single note's in tune, every overtone is ringing true with itself, and there's like this absolute perfect harmony between overtones and the actual fundamental string coming out of the whole of the guitar and resonating through the whole thing. That is what's trouble, is probably the instrument.
Well, so to summarize, I need to find someone to give me a $13,000 guitar.
I know.
That's solution 1.
Yeah. I will take this though. Try the B string, A string, and E string trick first.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try that because I know I go too sharp on the G and a few other things.
Leave the G where it's at. Tune the B string down, and the reason your G string sounds sharp is because if you tune your B string perfect and you play like a G chord right here, usually that D you're playing on your B string is going to be sharp.
Right.
Throws your perception of the G string off. So if you drop that down to where it's in tune, it brings those perfectly. That's actually in tune. Brings them in tune together.
Yeah.
And your E string, whenever you get that involved, it's sharp. So I just pushed it this way to make it in tune. That's pretty in tune right there. And once you get those 3 happening, your low E string, your G string, and your B string, then you check your D. It's off. And you check your high E string, and it's there. And if you're playing out of like a C position, though, all that changes. Say you're in the key of C.
Dude.
So your thirds tend to ring sharp. So if you play a 1 and a third together, the third will usually be sharp. So if you're playing a bar chord, for example, like this, that G string is sharp.
Yeah.
Killing me. But here, perfectly in tune. Because we made that G string now the third. So if I'm playing something that's like, like that, I'll tune that G string flat to compensate for that third on the G string.
And this is where we part ways, because I see what's involved in getting the precision so much that I think I'm okay with where I'm at. I'm okay. It's okay.
Well, you have a much wider skill set than I have. Mine's just a very this is what I do, you know.
But you do it so well, and it is so amazing to talk. I love talking to experts that have spent so long honing that craft and have just thrown everything into it, and just the volume of hours that you put into that thing. I lack the whatever you need, the focus maybe to stick to something like that. I need more variety and that sort of stuff. But it's like amazing.
A crazy person, man. So that's just like my thing. I dial in on that, and that's all I got. But you're one step away from a tinfoil hat, but you're just on this side of it. Every studio musician is. We all act like we know what we're doing, and like we got it together, but we don't. you know, we're a little more organized than like maybe the rock and roll throwing the TV at the thing, but still like we're all like, you know, a little off. That's kind of a thing. My fiance can definitely confirm that. She's up there about that. But and this is on the tuning thing. This is the advice I give anybody that plays, and this would apply to any fretted instrument. Write it down. So like sometimes every once in a while, you know, you feel like you get your guitar like really in tune. Like, oh man, I'm really in tune right now. You can tell, you can feel it.
Yeah.
Say I got a capo on my 7th fret up here. I don't have one handy. But say I got a capo right there and I'm playing, or on my 9th fret even, where it gets really hard. The harder you capo up, the harder it is to get in tune.
Yeah.
If I get a C-shaped A chord out of there, like really in tune once, I'll go through and I'll measure it. And so I'll take a harmonica at the 12th fret and I'll write down notes in my phone about how many cents sharp each string was, or flat.
Yeah.
So I can recreate it on that particular guitar. And so I got one for like my Santa Cruz, one for I got a 34 Martin, and then one for my mom's old Gibson, 2 different lists with all my different tunings for each one. And they're all different because it depends on the instrument.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is,
so,
wow.
Yeah, write it down. I know it's weird, but like that's, you know what?
It makes perfect sense. I did an album with a Ron Rocco when I discovered what they were and fell in love and bought one, and I didn't know how to tune it. And at that stage, you couldn't find anywhere in English on the internet how to tune this thing. So I just tuned it to what I thought sounded good. Did the album, great fun, loved it. I can never remember how I tuned that thing anymore, because then I since learned the correct way to tune it and thought, well, I don't like the sound of this at all. I would have to go back and reverse engineer how I did it in the beginning. So yeah, write it down, kids. That's a good note. Write it down.
And don't be afraid to try some new stuff. You know, I mean, I'm talking about the creative thing. You know, throw the guitar in a different tuning. If you want to get creative, play without a pick. It's like the simplest thing in the world. You know, you want to play different, put your pick down for a month. You will come back in a month a different guitar player. I made one of my students do that. She's this like 14-year-old harmonica prodigy that's learning guitar. And her name's Kiersey, and I was like, it's like, you're playing good. I was like, but you want to get a finger picking? I was like, you're not allowed to use your pick for a month. It's like, unless you're on a show making money with it. And she came back, and now she finger picks about as good as I do after a month of doing nothing.
Wow.
You know?
Wow. That's amazing.
It's just, you know, you have to like put these like hard restrictions on yourself if you really want to dial in on something. When I was in college, I remember like my teacher, Vadim, he was the guitar player for Earth, Wind & Fire and like played with Stevie Wonder and everybody. He's just like monster player. And he's like, man, I was like getting ready to graduate. He goes, you're killing it down here, you know, when you're playing on your G, B, and E string. He goes, but I can tell you're obviously not as confident down here. And he's like, you should go home and clip those E string and B string off your guitar. So I had one guitar that only had the E, A, D, and G string on it. And for 2 months, I played right there. So now I'm just as comfortable there as I am up here doing things.
That's a great idea.
You know, I'd have one teacher that was like, okay, we're not going to play our B string today in class. He'd be like, let's all solo, but don't use your B string. You know how hard it is to solo without using your B string? It's like really hard. You know, it's like you're just going and being melodic with that somehow, you know?
Yeah.
But whenever you get that B string back, you get that high E string and B string, you have a different perspective on it now. And your weaknesses became your new strengths. And that's the whole teaching thing for me. And I love teaching. I love teaching more than anything. And
I can tell.
I like to do it. But I mean, if I had it my way, I would be in the studio 2 days a week and teach 4 days a week. That's what I like to do. Or like run a conservatory, you know, something like that.
I can tell, dude. I can see your eyes light up with that sort of stuff. And
yeah,
and I'm seeing so many familiarities as well. I tried to write a short story where you're not allowed to use the letter S. You know, you do the same sort of restrictive things to build up, you know, or there are certain no adverbs for, you know, the next chapter or whatever, you know, all these sorts of things. Same thing. This restricting yourself actually opens up all these new areas that you haven't explored before. Yep. It's really, really cool. Okay, so before we move on from the guitar, what is the chord progression, plucking, riff, whatever, what's a nice thing that you're playing around with at the moment that you're kind of, or that the chords that you go back to if you're swapping between 2 or 3 chords to get a really nice, vibe going?
So my favorite chord is a 3 minor. If there's an opportunity to put a 3 minor in a song, I will always put a 3 minor in it. So if we're in G,
right,
that D minor to me is money. And obviously a 4 minor is great because the voice leading to the 1's beautiful. But if I'm just gonna do a 2 chord thing, I really like playing which is a 1 and a 2 minor 7 flat 5. It's like C major, D minor 7 flat 5. Because the D minor 7 flat 5 or the 2 minor 7 flat 5 implies a 4 minor. And it's a 4 minor 6 is what it does. And to me, that just gives me so many soloing options.
Yeah.
So there's a scale called Hungarian minor. Right, there's 1,000 scales out there, but the Hungarian minor scale is a major scale with a flat 6, and that is the most mystical, kind of beautiful sound to me. That there's I could just listen to that my entire life and be happy. It's so great, and that
is cool.
Just eats that up. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful. That was cool. All right. So now we are moving on to, actually we have 2 areas to move on to. Man, I've lost myself in talking to you because it's so much fun.
You're good.
All right. So we're going to move on to rapid fire questions in a tick. But first, we move on to a segment called The Worst Pitch. So this is where you come up with the worst pitch for a film or a book or any sort of thing like that.
Let's do go for it. You go first.
All right. My pitch, it's quite simple. A turtle with a disorder that means he eats his own shell. There's your story. Feature-length film.
Feature-length film.
Yep. It's either stop motion or it's, with live action.
Oh my God.
A turtle that eats its own shell has to go to therapy to learn not to. The problem is, no matter how bad the pitch is, you start thinking about it and you're thinking, yeah, maybe that's got legs. You could, you could
little short legs. Got legs.
Yeah, little, yeah.
Think here. I would say there's a person from some real hardy part of the United States, right? Where they're take care of yourself and the real manly side of life. But he's a guitar player. And he's a touchy-feely musician. And the world's ending, and it's post-apocalyptic. And he has to try to learn how to survive. That's it.
So it's
I think about that.
It's the guitar. I was going to say, does this draw from your own life? Yeah. The apocalypse hits, the zombies come, or whatever happens, and this dude's got a guitar strapped to his back.
Yeah, that's his axe. It has to become a real axe.
I can just picture him as well trying to, if I could just find the right tune, I can turn the hearts of these zombies back from sickness or whatever.
You really connect with them, It's probably that 1 minor 7 flat 5 progression would get them. If it could, it'd be that one.
They don't want brains. They want love in the form of music. That is very cool. There you go. It's the same thing every time. The worst pitch. It actually turns out to be there could be a good story there. That's pretty cool. I don't mind that at all. We're getting to the end. Is there anything that you would like me to ask you before we get to the final bit? Anything I haven't asked?
Man, it's a great question. That is a very good question. I have a good answer for that question. When I was in college, right whenever I was getting ready to leave and graduate, I knew I wouldn't have daily access to these amazing minds that were my teachers for the previous 2 years.
Right.
So I would ask them, I would say, if you were me sitting across from you, what would you ask you? And that was to ask them, because it's they know what I need to know better than I know what I need to know. So they've been 15 stages of musicianship ahead of me at that point in my life when I was 18, 19. And they sit back for a while and they think, and they give me the most wonderful information. So my response to your question would be to ask the same question to other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Hang on.
I would tell if you're a musician or you're trying to learn something, go to somebody that's better than you at what you're wanting to do and ask them what they need to ask you, what you need to ask. Yeah.
That is great advice. That is really good advice. Wow. We don't normally do good advice on this show, so that's really, really cool. That's awesome. I'm going to make a new segment.
That's why you
great advice
regularly. That's it.
Yeah. It is a really good advice because you're right, because they're the expert. They're going to know what you need more than you're going to know what you need at that stage. That's right.
A year and a half asking them questions. So my last 6 months, I ask them what I need to know. You know, like what should, and they'd be like, man, all this crazy theory stuff, just learn the record and play the record with the right tone and look cool on stage. You're going to work. It's like, that's it. It's like, you know, all these minor 7/5 arpeggios we've been practicing. When you go to audition for, you know, Lady Gaga, they're not going to ask you to play an A minor 7/5 arpeggio. They're going to be like, hey, can you play this song and walk across the stage at the same time? You know, you can play now. Can you walk across, play this and make sure the bends are in tune on this guitar solo, and flip your hair when the light changes? You know, that's big. You know, that's the skill set for that environment.
All right, on to the rapid fire questions. So, first question: you have one choice: Star Trek, Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Just not even any hesitation. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I've got to say, I've done this 4 or 5 times now, and things are alarmingly tilted towards the wars, but very good. You've made your choice. Excellent. I'm fine with that. Nice. Sadness. No, I'm fine with that. You can see which way I go. I mean, I love them both, but anyway. Okay, so you, the near future, 10 years away, cataclysm, that whole thing happens. The law is enacted that every person must have one tattoo and one tattoo alone. What is the tattoo that you would get?
My tattoo would be my home state of Missouri, so I could identify everybody that can actually take care of themselves.
And what sort of size and where would it be?
I think directly on the forehead. Just make it plain as day. Like, this guy here, he could probably kill a deer and gut it and eat it, you know?
That kind of works with the post-apocalyptic world scenario. Absolutely. All right. So, bit of a curveball. Which of your heroes would you most hate or fear to meet in person?
Oh, man. It's I would say Tom Bukovac. I don't know if you know who that is. He's the Nashville session guitarist, right? He's the guy.
Right.
And I've never met him, and he'd be super cool. I know it'd be cool, but still, just the level of accomplished he has on his instrument. In a room, I'd be like, oh god. Like, I would, obviously, if I got called to be on a session, he's the guitar player. Like, if I was on electric, I would be that would shake me a little bit. If I was on acoustic, I know I could hang. But Bukavac's probably a musical hero that I'd be like, oh god, here we go. We got to get it together, Nicky.
There you go. All right, very cool, very cool. All right, so you're allowed to pass one childhood toy onto your children and onto future generations. What would that toy be?
One childhood toy. So this is a very Missouri response. My dad found a pocket knife in the parking lot of the dump truck garage that they used to own. And he took it and he ground off the edge and the tip and made a handle for it that would fit my hand so I could whittle when I was little. And that was my childhood toy, was a knife my dad made.
A whittling knife. That is fantastic.
Knife when I was like 3 or 4. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is very regional specific.
It is. Most like Midwest thing ever. Yeah.
It does remind me of a time I was in my dad's workshop and there was a butter knife, just the normal, butter knife there. And I thought, I'm going to sharpen this beauty and make it like a really cool, like a buck knife. So I put it in a vise, blade up, and started sharpening it. And then, you see in films how they run the thumb sideways across the blade to see how sharp it is. I had no idea how that worked, but I thought, I was a kid. I'm going to do that. But I'm going to run it straight down the blade, not across. It was very sharp. It was very, very sharp. And there was blood. And it didn't go well.
I love that.
Whew. Okay. All right.
Man, we can do like G major, B minor, E minor.
I do like the Oh, hang on. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Oh. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so for those that are just listening to this podcast, what you might not see is that both myself and Nicky were attempting to play the guitar at the same time. What I was unable to account for was the slight delay between our recordings. So Nicky was actually hearing it a split second after I was playing, and also my mic tended to drown out his amazing guitar work. So rather than try to attempt that again, I'm going to play you some music that Nicky himself did for me on a recent project, so you can hear just how amazingly gifted the man is.